A 15-year-old boy watched the pages of a Bible turn to ash in the fire. He hated the Christian faith with everything in him. Standing in the cold Indian night, he made a final desperate vow. If God did not reveal himself by 5 in the morning, he would end his suffering by the train tracks. The clock ticked, 4 a.m. passed, then 4:30, and in that darkest hour of despair, a presence stepped into the room which would change his life forever. But the story of this fierce hatred did not begin with a burning Bible. It began years earlier with the love of a mother. In the late 19th century, the region of Punjab, India, was a place of deep ancient traditions. In the affluent Sikh household in Rampur, young Sundar Singh had everything a boy could possibly want. His father, Sher Singh, was a wealthy landowner. Wealth, status, privilege, they had it all. But for Sundar, his entire world revolved around the quiet, sacred moments before dawn. Long before the sun broke over the horizon, his mother would wake him. She would light a small flickering oil lamp, take his small hand in hers, and guide him to pray in the early hours. She was the spiritual heartbeat of their home. She did not just teach him rituals. She instilled in him a burning desire to seek the divine. You must seek peace of soul, she would tell him. You must find God. Then, without warning, she died. Sundar was just 14 years old. The sprawling, wealthy house suddenly felt massive, cold, and hollow. The oil lamp sat unlit in the dark. The morning prayers turned to suffocating silence. A profound existential crisis swallowed the young boy. He plunged into a desperate, frantic search for the peace his mother had spoken of. He pored over the ancient Hindu and Sikh scriptures. He read the Bhagavad Gita. He memorized verses. He read for hours until his eyes blurred and his head ached. He practiced intense meditation. He sought out Hindu priests and wandering holy men, begging them for answers. But nothing worked. The grief remained a heavy, crushing weight pressing down on his chest. Every prayer felt like it was hitting a bronze sky. It felt as if God, if there even was a God, had completely abandoned him to the dark. And as the months dragged on, that suffocating grief slowly hardened. It calcified. It turned into something sharp, volatile, and dangerous. It turned into rage. He needed a target for his immense pain. He found that target in the Christian missionaries who had set up a school and a clinic in his region. To Sundar, this foreign religion was not just wrong, it was a personal insult to the deep traditions his beloved mother had taught him. He began to organize other students. He led them into the streets. They gathered dirt and stones, hurling them at the Christian preachers who stood in the squares. They mocked their teachings. They disrupted their gatherings. Sundar became the most vocal, the most aggressive, the most bitter opponent of this faith in his entire town. But the climax of his hatred arrived on a freezing winter night, December the 14th. Sundar had recently purchased a copy of the New Testament. He did not buy it to seek comfort. He did not buy it to read about grace. He bought it to destroy it. Standing in the stone courtyard of his home, the bitter Indian winter biting at his skin, he lit a fire. He tore the thin pages from the sacred text one by one. He watched the ink curl and blacken as he dropped them into the flames. His father, Sher Singh, stepped into the courtyard and watched in absolute horror. He rushed forward, the heat of the fire washing over his face, demanding to know what his son was doing. "Are you mad?" his father shouted, grabbing his arm. "Why are you doing this?" Sundar did not answer. He just stood there, his face illuminated by the orange glow, watching the words of Christ turn to white ash. He did not know it yet, but this act of ultimate rebellion was just the beginning of a story he could never have written. He did not yet know the heavy price he would soon pay. He did not know about the bleeding feet he would carry across the frozen mountains of Tibet, because he had not yet seen the pierced hands. I want to pause here for just a moment. If you are a parent watching this today and your child has walked away from the faith, if you have watched them tear down everything you taught them, or if you have heard them speak words of anger against the God you love, I know it is terrifying. It is so easy to look at their anger and see only permanent rejection. You wonder where you failed. You wonder if the door's closed forever. But look at Sundar. Sometimes the most violent rebellion is actually a desperate, broken cry for help. When Sundar burned that Bible in the courtyard, he wasn't proving that God didn't exist. He was trying to force God to answer him. He was in agony. That fire was the loudest, most aggressive knock on heaven's door a broken 14-year-old boy could muster. God is not intimidated by our anger. He is not frightened by our grief, and He is certainly not driven away by our doubts. He sees past the fire. He sees past the thrown stones and the bitter words. He sees the shattered heart underneath it all. Sundar thought he was destroying the Word of God that night, but God was already preparing to speak a living word straight into Sundar's life. The darkest night of his soul was merely the stage setting for the greatest dawn he would ever witness. For 3 agonizing days and nights, Sundar had not slept. After watching the pages of the Bible curl into white ash in the courtyard, he retreated into the deepest isolation. He locked himself in his room, pulling the heavy wooden door shut, barricading himself against the world. Inside, the silence was absolute, thick, and suffocating. It was broken only by the relentless, slow ticking of a clock on the wall. Sundar had reached the absolute end of himself. The grief and the anger had consumed every ounce of his strength. In the dark, he made a vow, a dangerous, desperate ultimatum. He decided he would wait until exactly 5 o'clock in the morning. If God, the true God, did not reveal himself by then, Sundar was done. He would leave the house before dawn, walk down to the Ludhiana express train tracks, and lay his head upon the cold iron rails. He would force heaven to give him an answer, or he would end the unbearable pain himself. The hours dragged on like a slow torture. 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. The bitter December air seeped through the walls, biting at his skin. The room was submerged in absolute pitch-black darkness. His body trembled, not just from the freezing cold, but from the sheer exhaustion of a soul that had fought until it had nothing left. Then at exactly 4:30 in the morning, just 30 short minutes before his self-imposed deadline of death, something impossible happened. A blinding, radiant light suddenly flooded the locked room. It was so sudden, so intensely brilliant, that Sundar threw his hands up to shield his eyes, expecting to feel the searing heat of a fire. He was terrified that the house was burning down around him. But there was no heat, there was no smoke, there was no sound of cracking timber. Instead, a wave of profound, indescribable peace washed over his exhausted, shivering body. The light gathered in the center of the room, forming into a glowing, radiant cloud. And stepping out of that brilliance with footsteps that made no sound was the figure of a man. Sundar stared in absolute shock. He expected to see one of the ancient Hindu deities he had prayed to for so many years. He expected a warrior god to strike him down for his arrogance. But the figure standing before him in the quiet of his bedroom was not an Indian god. The man's face was marked by deep sorrow, yet it radiated an infinite, overwhelming love. And when Sundar looked at the man's hands, his breath caught in his throat. He saw the scars, the unmistakable, brutal marks of iron nails. Then a voice spoke. It was a voice of gentle authority, a voice that pierced straight through the boy's armor of rage and shattered his defenses in an instant. The words echoed the very question asked on the dusty road to Damascus in the book of Acts, chapter 9, verse 4. Why do you persecute me? I died for you. For you I gave my life. In that fraction of a second, everything changed. The fiercest enemy of Christianity in the village, the boy who had just burned the holy word of God to ashes with his own hands, fell to his knees. He bowed his face to the cold stone floor. He was not debated into submission. He was not convinced by a clever theological argument or a sermon. He was entirely, overwhelmingly conquered by grace. Sometimes we think the greatest miracles are the parting of seas or the healing of incurable diseases. But if you look closely at Sundar's life, the greatest miracle did not happen when the blinding light filled his bedroom. The greatest miracle happened inside his chest. In a single heartbeat, a heart made of cold, bitter stone was transformed into living flesh. The raging fire of his hatred was completely extinguished by the vast ocean of God's mercy. When the sun finally rose over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold, Sundar practically flew out of his room. He ran to his father, Sher Singh, shaking him awake. I am a Christian, the boy declared, his eyes shining with a radiant peace he had never known. His father stared at him, bewildered and deeply disturbed. He thought the boy was hallucinating. He thought the grief of losing his mother and the days of severe insomnia had finally driven his son insane. How could the boy who burned the Bible just 3 days ago now claim to follow the very God he despised? But Sundar was not insane. He had simply met the risen Christ. The consequences of that meeting, however, were immediate and devastating. Sher Singh was a proud, respected man, deeply entrenched in the traditions of his community. His son's sudden conversion was not just a personal disappointment, it was a profound public disgrace that brought immense shame upon the family name. The family tried everything they could to change his mind. They offered him immense wealth. They pleaded with him with tears. When that failed, they threatened him. But the boy who had seen the pierced hands could not be bought with gold, nor could he be intimidated by fear. Finally, the breaking point arrived. Standing before the elders of the village, Sher Singh looked at his son with cold, hardened eyes. The fatherly warmth was entirely gone. From this morning, the father declared, his voice trembling with a mixture of anger and grief, "I have no son." The heavy iron gates of his childhood home were locked securely behind him. Sundar was officially stripped of his inheritance, his family, and his safety. He was cast out into the unforgiving streets, wearing nothing but the thin clothes on his back. A teenager, entirely alone in the world, marked as an outcast. On September the 3rd, 1905, on his 16th birthday, Sundar Singh was officially baptized in the high mountain town of Simla. He chose to put on the simple saffron robe of a sadhu, a wandering Indian holy man, not to seek enlightenment for himself, but to serve the one true light he had seen in his bedroom. He walked away from the immense wealth of Rampur. He stepped out of his comfortable, affluent life, and he stepped onto the sharp, rocky paths of a calling that would lead him into the most dangerous, isolated places on earth. He walked with bleeding feet because he had seen the pierced hands. If you want to understand the heart of Sundar Singh, you must look at what he chose to wear. When he became a Christian, he did not put on a European suit. He did not adopt the customs of the foreign missionaries. Instead, he made a decision that shocked both his former community and the British churches. He put on the thin, bright saffron robe of a sadhu, a traditional Indian ascetic. He chose to walk barefoot. The visual contrast was striking. Imagine a young man wrapped in a brilliant orange robe, walking without shoes against the blinding white snow of the brutal Himalayan mountains. For Sundar, the saffron robe was a symbol of total surrender. It meant he owned nothing. He belonged nowhere. He relied entirely on the provision of God. His journeys were agonizingly severe. He walked through dense tropical jungles during the monsoon season, where swarms of leeches would attach to his bare skin, draining his blood. He climbed rocky, treacherous mountain passes where jagged stones tore at the soles of his feet, leaving a trail of crimson drops in the snow behind him. When villagers saw him approaching, they did not call him by a title of prestige. They simply called him the Apostle with the bleeding feet. But Sundar had one ultimate destination burning in his heart. It was a place where no Christian missionary dared to go. Tibet, the roof of the world. A land entirely closed off to the outside world, fiercely guarded by Buddhist lamas who viewed foreign religions as a deadly threat. To preach the gospel in Tibet was not just illegal, it was practically a death sentence. But Sundar went anyway. According to his own accounts, it was in a small Tibetan village called Rasar that he finally faced the ultimate cost of his calling. He had been boldly preaching the gospel in the village square when he was arrested by the local authorities and brought before the head lama. The trial was swift. The verdict was absolute. He was found guilty of spreading a forbidden religion. But the Tibetan lamas did not use firing squads, and they did not build gallows. Their method of execution was far more terrifying. Sundar was dragged to the edge of an abandoned dry well on the outskirts of the village. His arm was broken in the struggle. They threw him down into the pitch-black abyss. As he hit the bottom, he heard the heavy iron cover slam shut above him. He heard the metallic grind of a heavy padlock locking him in. The head lama took the only key and fastened it securely to his own belt. Inside the well, the darkness was absolute. But the darkness was not the worst part. It was the smell. The air in the well was thick, putrid, and suffocating. As Sundar blindly reached out, his hands in the dark, his fingers brushed against cold, hard shapes, he realized with a sickening jolt what they were: bones. Rotted flesh, human skulls. This well was a mass grave for condemned prisoners. He had been thrown into a pit of rotting corpses, left there to slowly starve to death in the dark. For 2 agonizing days and nights, he lay in the pitch black, breathing in the stench of death. His broken arm throbbed with white-hot pain. The cold was paralyzing. Most men would have lost their minds in that well. Most men would have cursed the God who let them be thrown there. But in the suffocating darkness, something profound happened to Sundar. The peace of Christ, the same indescribable peace that had filled his bedroom years ago, filled the rotting well. He did not scream, he did not curse. Even as he waited to die, he felt a strange, overwhelming joy. He walked with bleeding feet because he had seen the pierced hands, and if those pierced hands had guided him into this well, he would gladly die there. But heaven was not finished with the barefoot apostle. On the third night, as Sundar drifted in and out of consciousness, he heard a sharp metallic sound above him. The heavy iron cover of the well was grinding open. A sudden rush of cold, fresh mountain air poured into the stifling darkness. A voice called down, telling him to take hold of a rope. Sundar reached out with his one good arm and grasped the coarse rope. He felt himself being pulled up out of the pit into the starlight of the Tibetan night. When he reached the top, the heavy iron cover was securely locked back into place. A figure stood beside him in the darkness. Without saying a word, the stranger gently took Sundar's broken arm and set the bone back into place. The excruciating pain vanished instantly. Sundar turned to thank his rescuer, but there was no one there. The stranger had vanished entirely into the morning mist. The next morning, the village was thrown into chaos. Sundar was found sitting in the village square, calmly preaching the gospel once again. The head lama was furious and terrified. He demanded to know who had stolen the key and opened the well. But when he looked down at his own belt, his blood ran cold. The iron key was still firmly attached to his waist. It had never left his side. Who opened the unbreakable lock? Who pulled the dying boy out of the abyss? Sundar knew. As he walked away from that village, his feet leaving faint red marks on the mountain rocks, the vast towering peaks of the Himalayas stretched out before him. It was a breathtaking sight. And in that moment, the ancient words of the prophet Isaiah came alive. Isaiah chapter 52, verse 7, "How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of him that bringeth good tidings, that publisheth peace." His feet were scarred, they were bleeding, but in the eyes of heaven they were beautiful. This miraculous rescue in Tibet was not the only time God intervened in the most desperate moments of his journey. Years later, during a brutal, blinding snowstorm in the mountains of Kashmir, Sundar found himself trapped. The wind was howling, tearing through his thin saffron robe. The temperature plummeted, his body was entirely numb. Exhausted and freezing to death, Sundar collapsed into the deep snow, knowing he would not survive the night. But just as his eyes began to close, a stranger suddenly appeared out of the whiteout blizzard. The man did not speak. He simply lifted Sundar onto his shoulders, carrying him through the raging storm until they reached a small sheltered cave where a fire was already burning. The stranger laid Sundar down near the warmth, wrapping him in blankets. Sundar closed his eyes for just a second. When he opened them, the cave was empty. The mysterious stranger was gone. I want to pause and speak directly to you right now. Maybe you are not walking barefoot through the Himalayas, but maybe you feel like you have been thrown into a dark, suffocating well. Maybe you are facing a financial crisis, a health diagnosis, or a broken marriage that feels like a heavy iron lid has slammed shut over your life. You look around and all you see is darkness. You look at your enemies and you see that they hold the only key. Please hear me today. Listen to Sundar's story. In the darkest wells and in the coldest blizzards of your life, God has never lost sight of you. He is not confused by the locks that men place on your life. The enemy might hold the key, but your Father holds the universe. The same God who sent an unseen hand to open the iron padlock in Tibet is the same God who is watching over your life right now. Do not give up in the dark. The third night is coming. The rope is being lowered. Hold on to his peace, because the dawn is closer than you think. In April of 1929, a frail, deeply exhausted man stood at the foothills of the Himalayas, looking up at the towering, impossible peaks. Sundar Singh was only 39 years old, but his physical body was completely broken. 20 years of brutal beatings, relentless starvation, and constant exposure to freezing mountain temperatures had taken a devastating toll. Tuberculosis was ravaging his lungs, making every breath a battle. He was rapidly losing his eyesight. His doctors, his mentors, and his closest friends begged him to stay in the safety of India. They pleaded with him to rest, warning him with absolute certainty that his body could not survive another treacherous journey into the mountains. But Sundar looked toward the snow-capped peaks of Tibet with a quiet, unshakable resolve. The fire that had been ignited in his locked bedroom had not dimmed. He was going back. If you look at his 20 years of ministry from a purely human perspective, it is incredibly easy to view his life as a failure. He spent 2 decades knocking on the heavy ironclad doors of Tibet, and almost every single time those doors were slammed violently in his face. He did not build massive megachurches. He did not establish a wealthy religious organization or a comfortable global headquarters. He did not lead thousands of people in massive stadium-sized revivals. Most of his life was spent being rejected, mocked, beaten, dragged through the streets, and thrown into pitch-black prisons or rotting dry wells. Yet in April 1929, he put on his thin, worn-out saffron robe one last time. He said a quiet goodbye to his friends, turned his back on the safety and warmth of the world, and walked up into the freezing, blinding white wilderness of the Himalayas. He was never seen again. There is no grave for Sundar Singh. There is no grand marble monument marking his final resting place. There is no elaborate shrine for religious pilgrims to visit. His body simply became one with the unforgiving icy mountains he loved so deeply. He vanished completely into the eternal silence of the snow. Why? Why would a man who had captivated the entire Christian world, a man who had traveled the globe and preached to packed crowds in the grandest cathedrals of London, Paris, and New York, choose to die alone, anonymous and freezing, in a blizzard? Because the barefoot apostle never wanted an empire. He did not want fame. He did not want comfort. The 15-year-old boy who had burned a Bible in a stone courtyard was not searching for religious success or impressive statistics. He was searching for the God who had stepped into his locked bedroom at 4:30 in the morning. He spent his entire life chasing the beautiful face of Jesus Christ. Everything else, the massive crowds, the grand cathedrals, the safety of home, the loud applause of men, was absolutely worthless to him compared to knowing his Savior. As he took his final agonizing steps through the deep snow of Tibet, his lungs burning for air, his vision fading into white, the truth of his life remained as pure as it was on the morning of his conversion. He walked with bleeding feet because he had seen the pierced hands. We live in a generation that is completely obsessed with success. We want a comfortable faith. We want a religion that guarantees us wealth, perfect health, and an easy life free from pain. We have been taught to measure the blessing of God by the size of our bank accounts, the number of our followers, and the ease of our circumstances. But the life of Sundar Singh completely shatters that comfortable illusion. He reminds us that the call of Jesus Christ is not an invitation to a luxury cruise. It is a call to take up a heavy cross. It is an invitation to walk a narrow, rocky, and often dangerous path. Maybe you are watching this video right now and you feel entirely exhausted. Maybe you have been praying for a breakthrough in your family, a healing for your health, or a miracle for your finances for years. You have been faithfully knocking on a door, but just like Tibet, that door refuses to open. You feel like you have failed. You feel like your desperate prayers are bouncing off a solid brass ceiling. You are tired, you are heartbroken, and you are ready to quit. Look at the barefoot apostle. Look at the man who knocked on a closed door for 20 years, bleeding and freezing without ever seeing a massive, glorious revival. He teaches us a profound, uncomfortable, but desperately needed truth. Sometimes your greatest miracle is not that the door finally opens. Sometimes the greatest miracle is that you remain faithful while the door is shut. Your quiet faithfulness in the dark is more beautiful to God than 1,000 easy victories in the light. Do not give up. Do not trade your deep, authentic faith for cheap, temporary comfort. The world does not need more comfortable, lukewarm Christians. The world desperately needs men and women who are willing to walk with bleeding feet, simply because they are so completely captivated by the love of the Savior who bears the scars of the nails. The story of the boy who burned the Bible and became the apostle of the Himalayas is not just a piece of history. It is a direct challenge. It is a question echoing from the snow-capped peaks directly into your living room today. Are you willing to walk the hard path? Are you willing to follow the pierced hands no matter the cost? If the incredible story of Sundar Singh spoke to your heart today, please leave a comment below. Share with us where you are finding the strength to keep walking when the path is hard. Your testimony of faithfulness might be exactly what someone else in our community needs to read today to keep going. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We are committed to bringing you more incredible forgotten stories of heroes who changed the world with their unyielding faith. Until next time, keep your eyes fixed on the pierced hands.